guys, and welcome back to the Crawl Room. We're here once again in this wonderful ranty room for all things Formula One. The Mexican Grand Prix has come to a close, and what could be said about that race? It left a lot to be desired, didn't it? It was a little bit drab, a little bit boring. Bit of a shame, really. It promised so much, didn't it, this weekend? The qualifying was close and quite exciting at times, but in the end, it all just went a bit meh. So if you've never seen this series before, I award the drivers out a maximum of 10 points based on their race weekend's performance, and I go all the way down to 0 if they have a particularly bad one. Take a look out for bonus points, though. They're sometimes on offer for some drivers that do something extra special during a race, and on the very rare occasion I do award minus points as well for those drivers that do something extra special but for all the wrong reasons. So let's take a look at the current Crawl Room standings then going into this race. It's on the screen now. It's all close at the top. George Russell at one point had a 13-point advantage in this series, which is a lot, and he has thrown it away these last few races, and he's now no longer the leader. So it's going to be interesting to see where they go. Will George climb? Will he fall even more? Oh, it's all to be revealed, and I cannot wait. So let's kick things off with the winner, of course, Max Verstappen in his Red Bull, becoming the most successful driver in a single season now with 14 wins, beating the previous record of 13 shared by Michael Schumacher and Sebastian Vettel. I mean, let's be honest, there's more races this year. Max is the first to admit there's more races this year as well. So in theory, the most impressive one out of those 13 is Michael Schumacher, who had, what did he have, 16 races that year? He took the 13, so quite impressive really, isn't it? Seb, I believe, did he have 18 races in 2013? He might have done. But either way, it doesn't matter. Max now wins 14 out of 86 that they're doing a season now. So yeah, you know, congrats to him. A record breaker in that sense. Yeah, it's so bizarre, isn't it? These first couple of races we're thinking, oh, Red Bull fast but fragile. Already a lot to make up on the likes of Leclerc with like a 43-point lead in the championship, and now here he is just pissing off into the distance at any given weekend. Yeah, unbelievable stuff. Also ties the record for the amount of wins in a row by Red Bull, not by Max of course, which is 9, which was also set by Seb, but this time around they've had a Checo win in the middle of all of Max's wins. So yeah, if they win again, that'll become 10. And another record breaker. So yeah, a lot of things to be broken this year. But as mentioned, more races. Doesn't really matter. It's just a nice, cool stat, isn't it, I suppose? But overall, for Max's race, I'm waffling on about other shit because his race was fairly flawless, wasn't it? He got pole. He led into turn 1, which is a rarity at Mexico. Pulled a nice gap on Hamilton, extended when he needed to, saved his tyres when he's needed to, and in the end he just took a commanding victory over Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes. So, yeah, it all was just perfect, wasn't it? It was made even better by the fact that Ferrari didn't turn up this weekend at all. So, you know, made easier in that sense. Mercedes had a ridiculously compromised strategy for no good reason when it looked like initially they were going to be the threat. But it didn't come, did it? And all in all, it was just a flawless weekend by Max Verstappen. So I can only award him 10 points. A full 10, a perfect 10 to Max Verstappen this weekend. Drove really well. Congratulations, Max, on another victory. We'll see how all the cost caps and budgeting and everything affects him next year and into 2024 as well, of course, with the $7 million fine and 10% reduction in wind tunnel testing, which they've already got less of because of the Constructors' Champions this year. So, yeah, it might all play out. Maybe not for next year, but the year after it could make the grid closer. Who knows? But yeah, at the moment, 10 points to Max. And then we come to Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes. What a great drive this weekend by the Mercedes pair. They looked really good, didn't they? It was nice to see them do well in qualifying. In the race, they did as best as they could. Not sure what that strategy was, though. It was a bit unusual, wasn't it? Like, the hard tyre didn't look to be working all weekend, and then for some reason, Latifi pitted for hards. He got a fastest sector 1 or something like that, and everyone fucking panicked, and everyone just started going on hard tyres left, right and centre. And it was really the wrong call, wasn't it? But Latifi making a good sector, I suppose. You know, it did frighten a lot of people, and understandably so. But it was just a false alarm, everyone. Just a false alarm. You should have all known that Latifi was just messing with you. Yeah, so overall, what could be said for the weekend for Hamilton? It was It was a good launch off the line, started from third, looked to be like he was going to be third, but George Russell had no option but to go and try round the outside of Max, because Max firmly closed off the inside line into turn 1, and then it just meant that Hamilton got alongside him, forced him a little bit wide into turn 3, all fair, his first lap racing, into second place. Looked as if he had the measure of Max, but in the end we just all knew it was tyre management with the Red Bulls, didn't we? Keeping within like a 2-second window of him. And in the end, they elected to pit for the hard tyre. It was the wrong call. He tried to stay with Max. It didn't happen, and he ended up 15 seconds behind him or something like that, wasn't it? So, yeah, did really well, though, to hold off the likes of Checo, who couldn't quite get in within that DRS zone of him, could he? Checo was behind him. He got within 1.1. He got within, like, 1.006 of a second, but just could never get under that second to get the advantage of the DRS to get past him for a Red Bull 1-2. And that was all due to Hamilton's great driving, of course. Did really, really well there. So for Lewis Hamilton, I was going to give him a perfect 10, but he was moaning on the radio. And you've seen it before from me. I've awarded Palmers of the Week previously. I've knocked points off. And this time around it is points off for Lewis Hamilton. So he's only getting 8 this weekend because that moaning on the radio was needless. You put me on the wrong tyres, definitely on the wrong tyres. Where? Whinge. Yes, you are on the wrong tyres, but what can we do about it now? What can we do about it now, Hamilton? What can we do? We can't do anything, can we? Shall we just pit you again so you lose more positions? I don't know. I don't really know what people think. And yeah, a lot of people were complaining and moaning, but not quite as much as Lewis. Not quite as much as Lewis. He was frantic, wasn't he? And not to mention, we heard a team radio from Alonso. They're like, what tyres would you like to go on next, Fernando? Don't care. Car's driving great. Put me on anything. I'll do what I can. He didn't care. Wasn't bothered. But Hamilton, moan. So it's going to be 8 points on the cruel room to him. I've knocked him 2 points off because moaning. So yeah, there you go. 8 points to Lewis Hamilton. In third place, it is, of course, Checo. Sergio Perez, the home hero, of course, the Mexican in Mexico. Taking third place again for the second consecutive year, and for the second consecutive year as well. The podium was the same. So last year it was identical to this year's. So there you go. Another trivial fact that no one really gives a shit about. It's because I've not really got much to talk about the race because it was shite. But for Sergio Perez, it's a shame he couldn't get second place, really. The car had the pace to have second. But he just struggled, didn't he? You just saw it in qualifying as well. He was always on the back foot, always having to go out with clean air, with a clean track, because he wasn't putting that great a laps in qualifying. And in the race overall, he got George off the line, and that was all he did. Everything else was just all about keeping third. Yeah, you know, it was close to Hamilton at certain stages, but couldn't get within that DRS window to be able to overtake and mount a serious challenge on Hamilton and put him under pressure. So for Sergio Perez this week, it is just 7.5. I thought 7 might have been a half a point too low. And 8, it wasn't worthy of an 8. So it's a 7.5 to Sergio Perez. Overall, you know, it was a good race weekend at his home Grand Prix to get a podium, but it should have been second for definite, and he really needs to close that gap to his teammate, doesn't he? Because that gap's not great, is it? It was like 3/10 in qualifying, a relatively short circuit. He should have really got past Hamilton on those hard tyres, but couldn't. Yeah, it was all a bit of what could have been, shoulda, woulda, coulda kind of vibe. So yeah, 7.5 overall to Checo. Thrilled he got a podium at his own Grand Prix, of course, and those mad Mexicans are lovely. It was so great to see them all there, shouting, cheering. They were cheering every lap he went past. They just didn't care, did they? It was great. A great atmosphere, and yeah, well, I would love to be part of that. That would be my circuit I would love to go to. Sit in that old baseball stadium with all the Mexicans just shouting, Checo, 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 until couldn't speak anymore. I wouldn't mind that. So yeah, 7.5 to Checo. Then in fourth place, it's George of the Russell. Watch out for that top 5. Here he is back doing something that I think is remotely credible, but not brilliant. And again, it's going to come down to moaning. He was moaning on the radio, wasn't he? Like, I do understand George's a little bit more than I do Hamilton's, because George was like, keep me out on the mediums as long as you can. As long as you can, then I'll come and do the softs and do a long stint on the softs. Let me do that, let me do that. And they refused him that option. Even though it wasn't going to cost him any positions, because they were like 25 seconds ahead of the Ferraris anyway. It was a shame that they didn't let him do that. Because we saw with Daniel Ricciardo how well that really worked out. So it'd have been interesting to see what would have happened there. George maybe would have finished second had it not been for that. who knows? We're never going to know. They're going to know in the debrief, of course, with Mercedes. But overall, it was disappointing once again from George. A great qualifying P2. Made a mistake on his best lap in the final lap of the final sector. It'd have been a stretch for pole. It would have been a stretch, admittedly. But he might have had a better lap time and made it that little bit more uncomfortable for Red Bull. But as it were, made a mistake, had to abort the lap. Started P2, had no option but to go around the outside of Max, or at least try going into the turn 1, turn 2, turn 3 complex. Got forced a little bit wide by his teammate, which dropped him from second down to third, and then third down to fourth. He didn't really put on much of a defence against Checo, and I can understand. Checo was on the soft tyres, he was on the mediums. It's a first lap, let's not throw it all away. But then again, in comparison to his teammate, Hamilton was up there doing really well. And George really just didn't kind of have the pace, did he, to be honest? Elected not to stop under the virtual safety car. He wanted to again. Team elected no. I don't know why, because I think that would have been a good free pit stop, or as free as possible under a virtual safety car, and he could have easily gone on the hunt for Sergio. Again, if they'd have tried it, they'd got nothing to lose, would they? So it was a weird situation. They really didn't want to do anything with George this weekend. But yeah, overall for George Russell, it's going to be a solid 7 points. Yeah, he didn't do as good a job as Hamilton, who I scored 8. I knocked him a couple of points off for moaning. So George, in theory, would have probably deserved an 8, but I've knocked him off a point for moaning. So 7, I think that's fair. Certainly doesn't deserve the same amount of points as Hamilton, but he doesn't deserve to be penalised as much. So yeah, 7 points to George Russell. Overall, a weekend of maybe what could have been. Should have been a double Mercedes podium, if I think about it. I think that would have been the best outcome to that situation. And if they'd have tried some things with George and maybe listened to him, it could have been George second, Hamilton third, or it could have been at least George third for definite, I think. So there we go. But at the moment, it's just 7 points to George Russell. And then we come to the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz. Smooth operator. Yeah, I mean, it really wasn't. There was not really anything I can say about his race, is it? Qualified 5th, finished 5th, had no pace at all in the race. The Ferraris were absolute dog shite. Like, what on earth can I talk about? We didn't see him, just a nothing weekend by Ferrari. Like, really, really, really off the pace. I hope this isn't the end of the season that we're going to see now, because it'd be a shame, because I think Mercedes are improving but aren't quite there yet in terms of getting on top of Red Bull. If Ferrari drop back, it's just going to be an easy 2 more wins and 2 more victories for a Red Bull, most likely Max Verstappen. And no threat from Ferrari. I really hope this is just a one-off, but that was diabolically shite by them. Wasn't the driver's fault, though, of course, making loads of mistakes. Couldn't ride the curbs really well. There was loads of sideways moments, weren't there, in qualifying. Saw 1 in the race as well. So overall, for Carlos Sainz, it's just a solid 7, and I think that's as fair as I can give it. It wasn't anything special. It wasn't Sainz's fault, but started 5th, finished 5th. 5th. That's it. 7 points to Carlos Sainz. In 6th place, of course, is Shalala. Oh, Shalala. Sacre bleu, Shalala. Finishing in P6. Didn't really have the measure of his teammate all weekend. Qualified 7th. Got split by Bottas in that Alfa Romeo. So started 7th. Got up to 6th relatively easily. First corner. And then stayed 6th throughout the entirety of the race. That's it. That's all I can tell you. At least he overtook someone. But yeah, he shouldn't have been 7th. He should have at least been 6th, shouldn't he? And he did have a crash in practice. He had a heavy damage, didn't he? He sustained quite a lot of damage in FP2. Again, the car was just so unsettled on the curbs. He lost it going into one of the left, right sections. And he eventually fell off somewhere along there. I can't even remember where it were. It might have even been the first left going into the right. Left. I'm not sure. But either way, he fell off. Damaged his car in practice. Lucky not to take any penalties. But in the end, finishing 6th after starting 7th. Having damage. It's 5.5 to Shalala. Yeah, deserves to score less than his teammate, of course. I think that's fair. So yeah, 5.5 to Shalala. Then we come to Daniel Ricciardo in the McLaren, finishing in P7. He's disqualified on the cruel room anyway. Was it a good drive? Absolutely. It was a great drive. This is the strategy that George wanted to go on, of course. It was at the back of the pack. That bottom half of the midfield had nothing to lose, so kept him out ages on the medium tyres he started the race on. Pitted for softs, did something like 20 odd, 30 laps nearly on those soft tyres, and just kept carving his way through the field and made some great progress. But where it all came undone for his race, or where it all could have come undone, was just stupidly taking Tsunoda out of the race. It was a lazy look up the inside at a corner you can't really overtake at. He hit him and then they got joined together, and then Tsunoda went over his wheel and he went off that way. Ricciardo continued. He got a 10-second time penalty, which is fair enough, but he still finished 7th. Like, if you know that you can take a car out of the race and just get a penalty that you can overcome, then you may as well just take the car out of the race, hadn't you? It was a bit of a silly penalty. This is where I feel if you sustain no damage, but you are to blame for taking another car out of the race or seriously affecting his race, what's wrong with the drive-through? You know, what happened to the drive-through days of Formula 1 where that is a significant penalty, which means that you don't really want to be doing things like that because that will affect your race. You know, it's over and done with in the race, you know, come the final classifications, there's no dropping down, there's no appealing bullshit. It's just done, slam dunk, in the race, drive-through, you either do it or you get black flagged. And I think that would have been more appropriate for the penalty sustained for, you know, Daniel Ricciardo, because he did take Tsunoda out, and there we go. But yeah, it was a great drive nonetheless. It was nice to see some fire in his belly, nice to see him pick up some points after what feels like an eternity of not scoring any. It helps McLaren in the Constructors massively, but I do feel sorry for Tsunoda on this occasion. I think he was done the dirty on. So there we go. Nonetheless, it's disqualified anyway on the cruel room, so I can't award him points. I'm pleased he finished 7th, but I'm not pleased with how he finished there, let's put it that way. But yeah, overall, disqualified on the cruel room. Next up, it is of course Esteban Ocon finishing in 8th place in the Alpine. A good race overall. He needed to achieve some points to try and mitigate the damage that McLaren have done. He did that, didn't he? He did that, but overall it wasn't as good as his teammate this weekend, was it? Wasn't as good. He qualified inside the top 10 though. Did they line up 9th and 10th? I feel they did. Yeah, it was a great overall race by Ocon, but his teammate had the measure of him, didn't he, during the race? But unfortunately, Alonso, we'll get to him in a minute, had mechanical issues and was waved through. Ocon was waved through on Alonso. And it was just a shame to see that Alpine were losing their grip on this crucial 4th place in the Constructors with another mechanical issue for Alonso. But back to Ocon's race, it was a great race overall, and that's why I'm awarding him 8 points. I think he drove well, drove clever. He was on the hard tyre, wasn't it? But it was so confusing as to who pitted when, because they all ended up seemingly on the hard tyres, but they'd all pitted at like loads of different times. It was just so confusing. So yeah, 8th place overall. Couldn't keep Ricciardo behind him because he was on the soft tyres, which were just so much better on low fuel mode. Yeah, 8 points to Ocon overall. It was a solid race. He picked up some crucial points. We'll see how it gets on in the end of the championship. But yeah, could be a crucial 4 points, and he did all he could. Kept Lando behind him at least, didn't he? Which is something. So yeah, solid 8 points to Esteban Ocon. Then we come to Lando Norris. Qualifying was really good, actually. Did okay there. In the race, it wasn't as good. He was an early stopper, wasn't he? They were trying to mimic what Tsunoda did, which of course Tsunoda was the wrong call. It was the hard tyres early on, as it was with Norris. And at the end of the latter stages of the race, he was coming under a lot of pressure from the cars behind, of course, that were all on better tyres or losing out. He was initially outside the points in around 11th, wasn't he? Got up to 10th, had to allow his teammate through that was flying on those soft tyres. So he played the team game there and let his teammate through. Got ahead of Bottas, which was a crucial point achieved there. And then it was just a case of waiting and seeing what penalty Ricciardo had with that 10 seconds. In the end, the 10-second time penalty made no difference whatsoever. And that was that. So here he is finishing in 9th place. It was a team error in the sense that they pitted him far too soon on tyres that didn't frigging work. I don't know what on earth possessed him just by seeing a good sector from Latifi. Like, one good sector from Latifi doesn't mean that that's the right call at all. That just means he might have done something right for the first time in his life at one of the corners. Anyway, they all overreacted like absolute pansies, and this left a lot Norris in a situation where it was just, let's try and get the points, and he did just that. So picking up a couple of points, playing the team game, allowing his teammate through to ultimately finish ahead of himself and Ocon as well, of course. He's going to get 8.5 on the cruel room. I feel I've been a little bit harsh in a couple of races this year with Norris doing some good solid drives, but I've been scoring him low because it's on the bottom half of the top 10 as opposed to the immediate top 10. He's not in that 7th, he's more in the 10th area, and I always feel it's a bad race, but then when you look back at it, he's actually done all he can with the strategy he was given and the car he got. So yeah, overall for Lando Norris, it's 8.5. I think that's fair, and he's done a good job this season. He's really helping McLaren stay within this fight of Alpine, isn't he? It didn't work out this weekend, of course, for Alpine, and McLaren closed the gap. Ricciardo had a better race overall, but, Norris has been having the better racer for 99% of this season and doesn't need to be put down because the strategy didn't go his way. So, overall, 8.5 to Lando. Then the last of the points finishers in 10th place. It's Valtteri Bottas, ending a 10-race streak of no points whatsoever. Nil point. He may as well not bother turning up, had he, for the last 10 races. But here he is, finally picking up a point after a stunning qualifying as well. Let's be honest with that. A stunning qualifying. 6th place, splitting the Ferraris, and had pace in every session, didn't he? Q1 was up there inside the top 4. Q2 up there inside the top 4. And then ultimately, when everyone shows their full hand for that final Q3 time, here he is picking up a solid 6th place start. At the start of the race, though, he's so tentative, isn't he? You can see him. It's almost like he's not got the commitment. Like, he never fully sends a move, does he? He got the DRS on, was it Ocon or Alonso for quite a while. It was one of the Alpines. And he was like, closing. I'm dodging out. I might be able to go. Whoa. And then we'll just pull back and let him take the corner as normal. And we'll just feather him behind. It was like he'd not got no balls to have the confidence of just slinging it up the inside and seeing what happens. Of course, this point is absolutely crucial with their battle for Aston Martin. It extends the gap to 4 now as opposed to 3. So it's a crucial point. But it could have been another 1, I think. I think he could have had 9th at least. So yeah, disappointing to see in that sense. It was like a race was very well managed and maintained, and he wasn't taking any risks at all. But not taking any risks at all, I think, cost him 1 point at least, which could be really crucial. With only 4 points gap, Aston Martin looking good for the majority, and it's 1 lucky point that he scores in the end because Gasly was right up his arse end, wasn't he? So it was a point. It's a good point. It was a great Saturday, but not so good on Sunday. And yes, I know he was an early stopper with the hard tyres, but Norris did all he could. Norris got ahead of Bottas, and it was just a shame. I think he should have been 9th for Bottas, and I'm a little bit critical of him for that. So overall for Valtteri Bottas, it's 7.5 on the cruel room to him. It looked like the Alfa Romeo finally had pace. I just wish it had been more than 1 point, though. He deserved more than that, and I think he knows, looking back at it, he could have had opportunities where he could have scored more than that. So yeah, a crucial point, but maybe not enough. We'll see. But at the moment, it's 7.5 to Valtteri Bottas. Finishing in 11th place and just outside the points, it is, of course, Pierre Gasly.
Daniel Ricciardo sitting out 2023 is a real shame. But don't worry, Daniel, I've got the kettle on and all the other F1 rejects are here to give you a warm welcome. Esteban Ocon wants a game of squash.
Oh, Pierre. Oh, Gaz. Oh. Do you know what? That is a really harsh Palmer, but someone has to get at least 1 Palmer during a weekend. And if anyone was going to get it, it was going to be Gasly. Just missing out on the points fractionally at the end there because of a 5-second time penalty he got for forcing Stroll off the track. And let's put it into context. That 5-second time penalty, he wouldn't have lost 5 seconds had he just immediately given the spot back to Stroll. It'd have been a case of, okay, I forced him wide. But the thing is, it wasn't just forcing him wide. He had a slight lock-up and you think, okay, fair enough, it can argue the toss a little bit. But then you see him in the corner, open my steering up, definitely force him off the track, and then try again. So it was an intentional move to force Stroll off the track, and I don't fully understand why he ever thought that was going to be accepted. You know, he opened the steering up. Like, you can't do that. You really can't. And for him then just keep going, and like everyone said at the time, oh yeah, the 5-second penalty is actually quite good, you know, because it means that he's already 3 seconds ahead of Stroll, whereas he wouldn't have been. And yeah, that might be true, but all he had to do was wait another lap and get him down the straight. You know, it wasn't... Stroll was on the tyres for a very, very long time, and Gasly just had to wait half a lap. And what would that half a lap cost him? Maybe 2.5 seconds? And the fact is that they'd received a penalty last race weekend, and they didn't do the correct 5 seconds. They served 4.5 seconds of the 5 seconds, and then got another 5-second time penalty. So the crew of AlphaTauri were reasonably and obviously more cautious this time around at the pit stop, to the point where they kept him stationary for 6 seconds. So they penalised themselves by another second to make sure they didn't get another penalty, and it put strain on the team. You know, another 5-second time penalty. And had that not happened, those 6 seconds that he did ultimately serve for that penalty, he wouldn't have lost that had he just let Stroll pass straight away. It'd have been 2.5, 3 seconds as a max, and I'm convinced then that 2.5, 3 seconds that he lost would have meant that he'd have been closer to Bottas within a couple more laps, and would have had another lap at least of opportunity of overtaking him. So, bit of a shame there. So a harsh Palmer of the Week, but I feel deserved, because it was an intentional move to force him off the track. So there we go. Pierre Gasly, Palmer of the Week. Finishing in 12th place is Alexander Albon in the Williams. Oh, he was so close to points, wasn't he? So close, but he didn't quite deliver. He was high as 11th at one stage, wasn't he? But Gasly nipped through. Albon was putting Bottas under pressure, wasn't he? But obviously... Gasly came through on the fresher tyres. I think Albon was maybe thinking, look, let me not really defend too hard against Gasly, because we're not in the points anyway as it is. But if Gasly can have an audacious lunge up the inside of Bottas, they both go wide, I get through to 10th. I think he drove smartly there, because he did defend the position, but it wasn't like his life depended on it. Of course, if it were for 10th, it would have been a whole lot different. But within that situation, Gasly much fresher tyres, let him go through. Let's see if he gets desperate. He needs that point. Push him wide. And it didn't work out. But overall, for 12th place for Alexander Albon, it was a shame in qualifying he was out so soon. I think it'd have been a stretch to get that Williams through into Q2 anyway, but he certainly deserved better than 19th starting. I think he started higher up anyway as a result of penalties, but that doesn't matter. You know, he qualified 19th, just ahead of his teammate. That was it. Made a mistake on his final push lap where he was on the fringes of maybe getting through, so it had been a close call there. I'd see whether he got through into Q2, but overall he just made a fantastic progress throughout the race though, didn't he? He just kept chipping him off. You looked at the timing screen, because they obviously weren't showing you the race, because there was far better things to do, like watching people not having a fight but just further up the field. You know, he was chipping off the Hassers, he got through them quite nicely, K-Mag, then got past Gasly early on in the race. Then he got past Mick, and then that put him in the 14th, 15th window. Then the pit stops came. They pitted him a bit later than everyone else. That elevated him up a few more positions. And then he just chipped his way, and then all of a sudden we saw him on the fringe of the points going, wow, here he is, having another great, great drive for the Williams car. And to finish 12th, I think is really, really respectable. Could he have finished 11th? Absolutely. I think, you know, he could have put a bit more defence up against Gasly, but given the situation and the circumstance, I think it made sense to do what he did, and I don't blame him at all for that. So, yeah, he didn't let him through, though. This is what I'm saying. He just didn't go, here you go, have me 11th. Didn't do that at all. He just made a defensive move, but he wasn't as defensive as if he would have been if it would have been 10th. You know, like he was, of course, at the USA, where he was fighting like his life depended on it with a big train behind him. So, yeah, overall for Esteban Ocon, I felt it was a little bit harsh by a point, maybe. At the US Grand Prix, and here this weekend I think he drove really, really well, so I'm going to award him 9 points. I've taken a point off him just because the qualifying, I think he should have maybe started 16th, that kind of area, definitely not 19th anyway, and I think maybe if he just started that little bit higher, he could have maybe, just maybe, been a bit closer to that top 10 and maybe been in that 10th place when Gasly came a knock in, but we're never going to know. And in the end, I can't fault Alex for what he's done this year in a car that is really, really the back of the grid car, isn't it? Except this weekend it wasn't, you know. Admittedly, it wasn't the back of the grid car this weekend. That firmly lied with Haas, but it always does. But nonetheless, 9 points to Alexander Albon. A cracking drive. In 13th place, it is Zhou Guanyu. And what could be said for his race weekend? It was an okay qualifying. He did all he could, really. A new circuit to the Chinese driver, of course. He's never been here before. Practice was okay. Qualifying was okay. Was he 14th in the end? It wasn't as good as his teammate. But then again, he's not expected to be as good as his teammate. Bottas is meant to be better. And I think at some situations this year, Zhou has really delivered more than what Bottas could. It's just been the unreliability that's affected Zhou more than accidents and incidents and overall lack of pace. Yeah, Zhou this weekend I felt did really well. Again, I think this is a guy that's been going under the radar for me. I've always said I don't know how to judge these Alfa Romeos. Is this their actual pace now? Are we at the back, or are they just not delivering the performance they need to? But overall, I think it's worthy of 7. I really do think it's worthy of 7. He had some great battles, some good solid overtakes. He did an impressive move around the outside of Vettel at turn 1, didn't he, earlier in the race? And I thought, do you know what? He's done a good drive there. Okay, Bottas scrapes that lucky point. But Bottas went backwards, Zhou came forwards. So, again, I think it was a better race pace overall for Zhou, but the qualifying wasn't as good. So, maybe if he'd have had a top 10 start, he could have maybe stayed in the top 10 better than what Bottas managed in the end. So, yeah, I think 7 points to Zhou is absolutely fair enough. Again, like I said, I think he's gone under my radar quite a lot. I've scored him low points when maybe he deserved a couple more. And I think this weekend it is a solid 7, and that is a great score for Zhou. I really hope these last 2 races are positive for him, and I hope he can go into the next year more confident. He knows the circuits. Honestly, I think genuinely next year, if Zhou finishes really strong this year, goes into next year, clean sheet, goes again, I honestly could see by Spain onwards next year him starting to match Bottas. I honestly think he's got that ability there. If the car's good, of course. I mean, it could still match Bottas, but if they're racing for 19th and 20th, it doesn't matter, does it? You know, but if the car's as good as it were at the start of the year, last year, as it, you know, I think there could be something there for him. I think there's something special going on with Zhou at the minute. I think he's got his head down and he's worked it out. So fingers crossed. Anyway, he's certainly not a shunter. That's always a positive sign. He's not had half as many accidents as Tsunoda has in his first 2 seasons. He gets another go. So, yeah, let's wait and see. But I'm really looking forward to how Zhou gets on this year for these last couple of races and next year as well. But for now, just 7 points to Zhou Guanyu. And then we come to, I mean, I'm just going to breeze through these, really, because it was a difficult one, wasn't it? Sebastian Vettel finishing in 14th. And Aston Martin, no pace this weekend. Really struggled overall for pace throughout the weekend, finishing ahead of his teammate, but it didn't really matter because his teammate was only just behind him, and he did some good defensive driving. He was kept on the tyres a long time to try and do something, or if there was a safety car, and that was the only way it was ever going to work out their way. It didn't. Here they are towards the back of the grid. A really bad race. This was like what we saw of Aston Martin earlier in the year, isn't it? You know, just this lack of performance and no pace whatsoever. So for Sebastian Vettel, it's going to be a solid 6 on the Cruel Room. Difficult to judge more than that, really, and not much to say about his race other than some good defensive opportunities when they arose, but the cars he were defending against had already pitted for most part, so yeah, big shame, but there we go. 6 points to Seb. As already mentioned, finishing ahead of his teammate Sebastian Vettel, it is Lance Stroll coming up next, of course, finishing in that 15th position. Again, 6 points to Stroll. It was defensive driving. It was just trying to do something with a race that wasn't really coming to him. There was no safety car intervention. There was no virtual safety car for an extended period of time where they needed it to come. That was the only way they were ever going to get into any sort of contention this weekend, Aston Martin, and it didn't happen. So the Stroll is pretty much the same as Vettel. It is 6 points on the Cruel Room, and that's all I can do. It's just a nothing weekend by Aston Martin. Big shame, but 2 more races to go. 4 points now, so they need 5 in these last 2 races for an Alfa Romeo score none to secure 6th in the Constructors. It's all getting very exciting. Down at the back, isn't it? Getting exciting, but we'll see what happens. But for now, just 6 points to Lance Stroll. Then we come to Mick Schumacher finishing in 16th place, and again, a big shame. This this is a shame for Mick, because I think that lap time would have been good enough to get him through into Q2, but he had it deleted, of course, didn't he? Meant he started out of Q1. He got eliminated in Q1, I should say. But overall, I don't think it mattered. I don't think it mattered one iota, because the Haas's had no pace whatsoever. They were overtaken by Latifi, by Albon in the early stages. They were running at the back and last, and this is what we see from Haas all year long. However many times we come to Mexico, they're always at the back. It's crazy. Might have to become a new catchphrase, that. We're a Haas, always at the back. There you go. It is just unbelievable how lacking of pace they are at Mexico. Absolutely terrible stuff. So it's just, again, it's the same as Aston Martin. They could do nothing. Haas really couldn't do anything, and it's just a solid 6 to Mick Schumacher this weekend. It's all I can do, I'm afraid. What more can I do? He did what he could, but it was ultimately going to be flawed all the time. So 6 points to Mick Schumacher. Then, of course, 17th place. Already covered it with Mick. It's just 6 points again to K-Mag. You know, just nothing. Absolutely nothing. Because we're a Haas in Mexico, always at the back. There you go. So yeah, it's just an absolute nothing weekend once again. At least he got into Q2, the first time Haas have ever got into Q2 in Mexico. And when did he start? 15th. Had a 5-place grid drop, started at the back. It didn't matter. It didn't matter. It was all much of a muchness. If Mick had got into Q2, where would he have started? 15th. Where did he start? 15th because of K-Mag's penalty. It wouldn't have made any difference, so there you go. Yeah, just 6 points to K-Mag as well. Then we come to Nicholas Latifi, disqualified on the cruel room anyway, and there he is, the little clown. The little clown. Unbelievable stuff. He had no pace whatsoever, did he? Albon didn't get a really good lap in Q1, of course, because he made the mistake. Latifi did, and he was still behind him. And then in the race, he was firmly last. He did have a couple of overtakes, though, didn't he? On the Haas's, as mentioned, no pace from the Haas. But ultimately, he finished about 45 seconds behind this pair of Haas's that were at the back. So, yeah, Nicholas Latifi, absolutely shite. Shite. Did nothing. There we go. Latifi, disqualified in the cruel room anyway. Can't score any points. I wouldn't have done anyway based on that race weekend's performance. And, yeah, we'll come to the retirements. The first retirement on this list, of course, the last in the race, is Fernando Alonso. Oh, Fernando. Oh, do you hear the engine, Fernando? Yes, it's hand grenaded itself and making all sorts of noises. Oh, what a shame. He was driving ever so well. He was going to be secure of that P7, wasn't he? Maybe, just maybe, Ricciardo would have gotten him, but it wouldn't have mattered with the 10-second time penalty, because let's not forget, Alonso was a long way up the road on Ocon and the likes. Then he started to have the issues where he was losing pace, allowed Ocon through, allowed everyone else through, and then eventually just blew up and expired. So Alonso's race was compromised before we knew it, if that made sense. That where he started losing time was the moment his engine were having problems, and of course then allowed Ocon through. So he'd have been firmly 7th and have been doing a cracking job. But overall, what do I score retirements? Unfortunately, it can only ever be a maximum of 5 points, and I have broken that rule a couple of occasions this year, but for good reason. But this time around, I can't. I'm so sorry, Alonso. 5 points, and this is really costing him in the Cruel Room title, because he's had quite a lot of retirements in these last few races, and he's losing his grip. I still think it's realistically between the top 6 for the Cruel Room title, but maybe Alonso's in that miracle stage now where he needs some great performances that are going to award him bonus points and for his rivals to make mistakes. So, yeah, at the moment, though, it's just 5 points to Alonso, and I was so sorry when he retired. And last on this list is Yuki Tsunoda, already covered it with Ricciardo, of course. Tsunoda disqualified, so I can't award him any points, but it wasn't his fault. Tsunoda wasn't his fault. He was having a great drive on the cusp and fringes of the points. I think had Tsunoda remained in the race, he was on the compromise strategy like the likes of Bottas and Norris were. So I think Gasly would have got him anyway. But overall, I thought that was an encouraging drive by Tsunoda. I didn't think he did anything really wrong there this weekend, and certainly wasn't to blame for the incident with Ricciardo. So an unfortunate way to lose the race and to fall out of the race. And his rival really, yeah, of course, 10-second time penalty is really a hearty penalty. But when he was on the strategy he was on to be able to carve his way through the field and make it make no difference at all, Going to be a bitter pill to swallow that for AlphaTauri and for Tsunoda, who did nothing wrong. So yeah, unfortunately Tsunoda disqualified on the cruel room anyway, but wasn't his fault this weekend. So there we have it, guys. Those were the runners and riders of the Mexican Grand Prix. Let me know your thoughts and feedback down below. Did I score any drivers too high? Any too low? The results are on the screen now. Look at that. The updated scoreboard with my scores on that I've just given. We've got clear leaders now. The pack is bunching up but extending at the same time. There's realistically top six. Top six have got a chance here, haven't they, of winning this title. But if someone does something ridiculously extra special, like Latifi win a race, it could undisqualify him and could see me score him 6,000 points. It's never over till it's over here on the Cruel Room Championship. More goddamn exciting than the F1 season has been this year, let's put it that way. So, as always, a massive thanks goes out to Dan of Mushy Gaming for providing me with the Cruel Room scoreboard that you're seeing now. It also goes out for him for the intro, for the little driver icons you see in the corner of the screens as I talk about them. Without him, this series would be more pointless than it already is. And who can forget Dave, F1 Games PlayStation, for the Jolie and Palmer skits that you all know and love. I'll see you all in a couple of weeks' time, or is it next week? Fuck knows. You know what I'm like. I just don't care, really. I just see when there's a race on, watch it, and then come and talk to you guys about it. It's Brazil next, though. I know that much. Promises to be an exciting race. I absolutely love Brazil, adore Brazil. I hope it's a thriller. I hope it's a cracker. I really do hope we see all three teams up there with their 6 cars battling for the victory. I want Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull. I want them all up there, giving it their all, strategies, everything, throwing at it, a mix of everything. I want drama. I want them all to blow up, crash and implode on each other. Of course I want them to jump out the car nice and safely. And then I want someone like, I don't know, Valtteri Bottas to win the race. Let's go for that. So yeah, let's see what happens this weekend, of course. But yeah, I'm looking forward so much to Brazil. I'll see you all then. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. And as always, much love.